So in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting in a hybrid model, both virtually and in person. The Cemetery Committee is conducting this meeting on April 3rd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Zoom platform and in person, and in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued on April 1st, 2020, and amended on May 7th, 2022. If you are recognized, please state your name and address. This meeting is being recorded. I, Rod Rydell, hereby call this meeting to order. All committee votes will be taken via roll call. We will start with an attendance roll call of committee members. When I announce your name, please reply. Brian Davidson. Aye. Jerry Susi.
Here.
Jeff Walton.
You're muted, Jeff.
Here, sorry.
Thank you. Priscilla Sturgis.
Here.
Rod Rydell here. So we're all here tonight. Deed signing.
Zero.
We had no deeds this past month, so we'll move on to the next point. Our next proposed cemetery committee meeting will be the first Wednesday in May. That's May 1st, 2024. Is that all right with all the committee members? Okay. Then we have the approval of the minutes, and we have two meeting minutes upon which to pass our review and approve. So let's talk about the first set of meeting minutes, which are dated on February 7th, 2024. Are there any comments or edits to suggest to the February 7th, 2024 meeting minutes? Okay, then let's go on to the meeting minutes for the March 6th, 2024 meeting. Are there any comments or corrections, Priscilla?
I have a correction.
Okay.
For D7, the last sentence, it is the Umbrella Art Center. It is not Emerson Umbrella.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Umbrella Art Center.
Art Center. Are there any further edits or discussion on this second set of minutes? So I'm going to ask for someone to make a proposal to endorse, approve these two sets of minutes.
Sure, Rod. I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of February 7, 2024 and March 6, 2024 as amended.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, we'll have a roll call. Let's start with Brian Davidson.
Aye.
Jeff Walton.
Aye.
Okay. Jerry Susi.
Aye.
Priscilla.
Aye.
And Rod Rydell, aye. Okay, both meeting minutes have passed unanimously. Now we can move to the next agenda item.
Staff report.
Okay, staff report.
In Aaron's absence, I will report. So we finished the spring cleanup in Old Hill Burying Ground and Main Street Burying Ground. Spent some time picking up storm debris. We've had a lot of wind and rain this season, which has been just great. We did open the bids on Friday for the maintenance contract with the cemetery. Currently reviewing those, evaluating those, and trying to figure out what we're gonna have for the season, for the year. Flags will be put out next week on the graves of the veterans in Old Hill Burying Ground and Main Street Burying Ground prior to Patriots Day. We also will mark the graves of the Revolutionary War veterans in Sleepy Hollow prior to the Patriots Day parade, just to have that done. We did have a meeting with the contractor for the mausoleum. They are working on a plan of work to give to us, and their start date will be after Memorial Day. Working with June 3rd as a date right now. We'll see when they get their information to us and how all that works. And during the month of March, we had 3 full interments and 2 interments of cremated remains.
Great. Are there any questions, comments for Tish regarding the staff report operations? Okay, then let's move on to item D2, lot transfer, the Honan family.
Catch me again. Okay, this is a lot that Stephen and Francis Honan had purchased. It is lot K 117, Chestnut Hollow. It's a 4-grade cremation lot. They have 4 children. Both are deceased now. They have 4 children. Only one of the children wants to be interred here. The other 3 children want nothing to do with this lot. So all have signed a letter, a notarized letter, asking that we just transfer all of their ownership rights to Stephen Honan Jr.
And do we require an approval from the committee for this?
Yes, it's a transfer of ownership. Yeah.
Okay, is this the sort of thing that we do a roll call on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there any discussion or question about the transfer of ownership for this particular lot? Okay, in the absence of that, may I have a motion to approve this transfer?
I'd make a motion to approve the lot transfer of the Honan family.
Anyone second?
I'll second.
Okay, then let's do a roll call. Brian Davidson,
Aye.
Jerry Susi,
Aye.
Jeff Walton,
Aye.
Phyllis Sturgis.
Aye.
Rod Rydell, aye. Okay. Item D3, budget review.
Yes. So, according to our annual calendar, one of the things for on April's agenda is to do some kind of a budget overview. So we've been talking, Aaron, unfortunately couldn't make the meeting tonight. Eric Shaw is on the call as well. He's the assistant superintendent. I know some of you have met him as well. But we have been talking with Bob Hill, who is the business manager for Public Works. And so he is the one who is going to give a little bit of an overview of the budget for the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, as I joked with some of you at the start, I'm the business manager here. Been with Public Works about 7 years now, first as management analyst on water and sewer, and then when Alan became superintendent, I moved over with him and became the management analyst for Public Works. And then effective July 1st of this year, or last July, they reconfigured our organizational structure and I became the business manager, basically focusing on budget issues and the business side of the 3 enterprise funds we run now: water, sewer, solid waste, and then potentially, if we are successful with town meeting, and stormwater utility that is also moving forward. As you can tell, I got a little gray hair and I've got a few wrinkles. I've been kicking around the public sector my entire working life, primarily in the public housing authority. Assistant director of a couple of housing authorities over the years. So I'm used to interacting with boards. I also serve on a couple of nonprofit boards, so that I like to, when I see a group like this, say to you, I feel my job is telling you what you should know. I mean, I'm telling you what I think if I was sitting in your chair, you would want to be aware of to deal with your fiduciary responsibilities as a member of the committee and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I'm gonna spend my time tonight. And the other thing is, before I start rolling here, is to talk about the fact that this year has been kind of a transition challenge year for the town as a whole at the finance budget level, because there's been a lot of change. I mean, we got a new finance director. We pretty much watched the whole finance department leave over a period of several months and that sort of stuff. So this is not a normal year as far as the information I can even get to know what's going on with our budgets and that sort of thing. But that's just kind of a general frame things. But we're getting there, I think, with the new team in place, and we're beginning to see traction and things falling into place. So hopefully the next time I see you, I'll be in a better position to inform you and answer your questions and that sort of thing. Before we even talk about the budget that is being proposed for the cemetery for FY25, I just wanted to talk about back to what you should pay attention to. And there's two funds that the cemetery committee should be concerned about, but you're used to hearing about the general fund, which is, the town's main, operating fund. That's for most of regular town government. And that's where your property taxes go. That's where state revenue goes. That's where some of the other local receipts they collect, and then, grant money and that sort of stuff. Then you have the proprietary funds, which are basically, water, sewer, electric, the swim and fitness. They're basically, they all have assets. They have buildings or something they have to maintain. And they collect revenue from customers for a service that was provided. And then you have special revenue funds, which are basically money that is collected for some sort of a service or something that's provided and that sort of thing, that is restricted by law as to how it can be spent. And that's what we call, for this group, the Cemetery Special Revenue Fund, or we just call it the Cemetery Fund. Okay, and that's to account for the funds that are derived from the sale of burial, interment fees, and they're basically what can be used to support cemetery operations. Traditionally, about 65% of our annual operating budget for cemetery would come from that fund, with the balance being provided from the general fund. But that's not always the case, because in lean years, the town will sometimes have the cemetery fund carry the full cost of operating the cemeteries. And I will clarify this with audited balance numbers, because of the staff turnover and things like that, we don't yet even have a draft audit for fiscal 23. So the last audited fund balance for the cemetery fund was $490,099 as of June 30th. My estimate, because I can see all of the pieces that go into calculating what the new fund balance will be for FY25, I'm estimating that it's going to be about $373,232 as of when they finally close the books on June 30th. Based on the information I can access through online accounting and everything else, I basically looked at the last 11 years worth of history in that account to give you a sense as to, well, what's the usual as far as, what do we take in for revenue? What do we usually, spend out of, and that sort of stuff. I mean, over the last 11 years, we average about $155,000 in revenue. And that's usually about $70,000 in interment fees, and $40,000 in lot sales and other cemetery revenue, and about $45,000 from the perpetual care fund. We then have a permanent fund, which is what, and those are all the funds that the town holds in a fiduciary capacity as a trustee. It's basically and it's also money that's legally restricted to a particular purpose or that sort of thing. And that's what we're used to hearing as, it's officially the Cemetery Trust Fund, but it's the Perpetual Care Fund. And that's where the contributions for perpetual care are held. And that principle can never be touched by statute. It can't be touched. All that we get to spend out of it is what is generated in interest income. And in this town, the interest income for the Perpetual Care Fund and like the UCAGO Fund and some of the other special funds this town has, some of them going back 200 years, 250 years, are all managed by the trustees of the town donations. And that's not typical for all communities, but it makes sense in the point of you have an entity that is basically rolling up all of the trust funds into one investment pool. So rather than having, several little pots of money being invested, you've got one larger pot of money that, and they have a professional fund manager that advises the trustees of town donations on how that portfolio is, managed. And the audited balance as of June 30th, 2022 in that fund was $4,482,253. And unfortunately, I don't have access to enough information to even want to take a guess as to what the perpetual care fund will be this year. It will be basically whatever we've taken in perpetual care. Typically, the interest income it's generated in that fund and then washes into the regular cemetery fund balance. So I can actually see, okay, yeah, there it is, come in that year, and the interest came in that year, and I can go through it and follow that sort of thing. So that from the standpoint of what, and this is partly what I'm trying to do longer term with also the Public Works Commission, is begin to provide, at the very least on a quarterly basis, kind of a financial health of the town's public works program, so that, moving forward, hopefully by the time we start the fiscal 25, that you're going to be seeing quarter reports saying this is what the two fund balances that I just told you about are, so that you have some sense of how are we doing as far as that's concerned. And because we also have historical information about what we'll typically collect, I'm used to also doing something that says, this is where we're at now. This is where we were at, last year at this time, and this is what the average is. So you at least have, a quick dashboard that you could look at to know where we are as far as these things are concerned. Because the one role you folks can play longer term is whenever the town is looking to balance the budget, partially using cemetery fund balance. And it's like I say, traditionally it's been 65% out of the fund balance, 35% from the general fund. If they're doing that as a tactic to partially balance a budget, you're in a position to slap back and say, no, we don't think that's correct. We have other, because that's really the only source, the fund balance is really the only source we have for both operating expenses for the cemetery beyond whatever the town appropriates for the general fund, and for capital expenditures beyond whatever we might be able to get out of CPC or from other grant sources and that sort of stuff. So it's, you don't want to just look at it from the standpoint of if it costs us $200,000 a year to run the cemetery division, and we're collecting, that amount in revenue, it breaks even, we don't need to worry about it. You want to make certain that we're not spending more than we're taking in, or understanding that if we're going to run a deficit, if you look, because we're spending more than we're taking in, it's with a conscious decision, because you don't want to drive the fund balance down so there's nothing, because there is a major capital expenditure we need to accomplish. We don't have any money there as far as that's concerned. Everybody with me so far? Any
Very clear.
questions? Okay, so you want to throw up the slide? And now I've kind of told you where the money comes from. Now I just want to give you a quick show of, and this is typically what would show up in the budget book every year, is a table that would look something like this. So, and it's broken out into, major areas, what we spend in, personnel, and part of what you see, you look at the personnel, it kind of jumped a lot last year and it's going down a little bit this year. What's that all about? Well, remember last year we added a second full-time position. We guessed at what we thought it was going to cost for benefits, everything else. We guessed a little high. So this year we were able to dial it down a little bit. That's all that is. You look at last year, personal services, purchase services, you can see consistently going up. That's the big one for us, because that's where we're You know, our big expense for purchase services is the landscaping contract. And last year, they kind of said, well, we want you to pay for that all out of the fund balance. So that was what this little direct pay minus 125, 833 is down below there, is that they were just basically saying, that's how we're gonna show it. It's not the most elegant way to show it, but this wasn't my presentation. But that's what is going on with that. And then, you know, supplies and services, you know, I mean, they went up last year because of, you know, plans we had that we're gonna need Asian materials, that sort of stuff. But it's not a large budget. There's not a lot to be happening there. And every year we budget $40,000 for capital outlay there. If my memory serves me correct, usually like 10 is for marker restoration, that sort of stuff, and then the other 30,000 is for whatever you guys and Tish and company decide we need to do there for the year. Some years we spend it all, other years, as you can see, because 21, 22, and 23 are actuals. 24 is what we budgeted, and 25 is what the current year request is. That's, you know, those are the 3 years you can see what we actually spent as far as that is concerned. Anybody have any questions so far?
I apologize for not understanding the direct pay line in fiscal year 2024.
Yeah,
That is money that came directly out of the cemetery fund.
correct.
And so in some ways, because it came out of the cemetery fund, you deducted it from the budget?
That's the way they reflected it in the budget book. I
Okay.
would have done it in a different
Okay,
fashion, but I don't like to
no, I.
put
no,
something up there that if you go to look at the budget book from last year, you go, oh, wait a
No,
second, this is different.
No, Bob, we're not asking you to justify or
Yeah.
not, right? This is great, this is great, just want to understand. So actually, in 2024, the budget was 233,790 plus
Yes,
125,000
Correct.
These were my glasses on. So
Yes.
I know, I
Okay.
can see it.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
okay, thank you.
yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
you're
And
right.
yet our operating expense, comes down to like 107,000. It was not really that.
It's not really 107.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you. Thank
all
you.
right. And then if you scroll down to the this is, at Public Works, we like graphs and pie charts and all that sort of stuff. All right, so it just basically shows you the slide on the left shows you, that's the overall, funding, and what are we spending? We're spending, most of it on operating, the 90%, 347,000 is operating, 40,000 proposed capital, 10%. We don't have any borrowed funds out there, so we're not paying off any debt or that sort of stuff. And they're in essence saying for FY25, we believe, because we still have not seen a final version of the recommended budget. So we can see all of the detail. But my understanding is this next year, they're expecting the fund balance to pick up the totality of the cemetery operating funds. And that's why it's being, reflected that way. I'm saying we're gonna hit the cemetery fund for $387,000.
So based on I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to clarify. Based on what your comment was before, that's going to take the cemetery fund down to nearly zero.
Well, that's partially offset with if we didn't sell any lots or we didn't have any interment fees or any of that sort of thing, then that would take it down close to zero. But, when we look at the average of what we typically take in a year, where we've averaged about $155,000.
We're taking whatever the balance is at the beginning of the year and basically doing this, and we'll build that back up to $150,000 if it's a good year for dying.
Yes, if it's a good year for dying, and also what is it reflected here anywhere is this year's actually been a very good revenue the mausoleum,
Oh,
has, hit us for, and, we're already for this year. Our current revenue for this year is $493,495.
Right.
So, and I think that's kind of what happens when you have somebody who's trying to balance the town's budget and they're looking for low-hanging fruit to balance things. When you look at what the balance was, you looked at where we were at in revenue for the first 6 months of this year. We were an easy town.
Okay, I'll just be quiet after this one point. But we have received a CPC grant, which is a matching grant.
Yep.
And it was $340 some odd thousand that CPC was going to give us, the expectation that we were going to supply $340,000. And at the time, this is a year and a half ago, we thought that we'd be able to do it from the funds from the mausoleum, right?
And we still should be able to do that, because we're only, we're 8 months through the year. It usually takes because of the way
I see.
accounting works for the revenue we get for interments and for lot sales wash through the perpetual care fund. They go there, and then a couple of times a year, the town accountant washes out that money into the fund balance.
Oh.
So I, at this point, there is still revenue that hasn't shown up yet that we've already actually received.
So things that wind up in the cemetery fund first, not everything,
Not
but
everything.
first wash through the perpetual care fund
Yeah.
and then show up in the cemetery
Yeah.
fund.
Yeah,
Okay, that's interesting, very complicated.
Yeah, well, and when I go back through, because, my original training, I always say to folks is, I'm trained as a political scientist. So the goal always is, not only, what is happening, but why is it happening? So I'm forever going back let me find the original enabling legislation or those sorts of things. And, one of the joys and curses of working in Concord is we've been around a long time. And some of these things you look at go back to, quite a long time ago. When I'm looking at some of this stuff for the cemetery that, was initially approved in 1892 and has been modified over the years, it makes it interesting. But for whatever reason, that's how it was structured. And, when I go back to prefaces saying, I'm still learning, I feel like I'm pretty much at the point where I've got a handle on knowing what I have to watch. I feel like I've got a sense of some historical spending patterns and those sorts of things, but I'm still trying to wrap my arms around this perpetual care thing and the timing of when revenue washes out and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping, especially now, since we have a fully staffed town accounting department, we have been running with this town accountant for, more than a year. And now we have both a town accountant and an assistant town accountant. So hopefully they can get caught up and do things, because we're usually not this late in the next fiscal year without at least draft audit reports from the prior year. But, my whole goal is to start educating you, and in situations where you're not quite sure, or you'd like to see it in a little different fashion, or you have questions, that's what I'm here for.
Well, we thank you very much. Is it appropriate for us to open this up for the committee for discussion? Are there any questions for Bob? I think we have Jeff with some questions.
Yeah, Bob, thank you very much. And I realize you're just getting your hands around this, and we've probably been a squeaky wheel on this because we haven't had the type of financial accounting reports you've been speaking about, and very much like to see it. I got a couple of points. One, I'd like to make sure we captured the balances that you quoted in the minutes and make sure you check them before we, confirm them. And then get the copies of the reports that you showed in the sent to us. The second thing is I'd like to get a sense from you, what other special funds or what other departments generate 100% of their own operating budget. So just a list of them. I'm sure there's 5 or 6 of them that you pay fully through user fees. So I'd like to see that list for the departments. And then the third thing, I guess, is I'm disturbed. We've talked about this a couple of times about the amount of funds that come out of the general funds. And I know it's a challenging time, but we've had assurances in the past, and I know it's the goal to get to a 65-35, recognizing the true value that the cemeteries bring to the town and our responsibility for our forebears here in town. I'd like to have this opens up a broader discussion. I'm also very concerned about our supply of cemetery plots, and this has come up before. So, having word that we're going to end up having to pay for our own operations, I think demands us to really look at our own operations and figure out how we want to strategically go forward, because it doesn't sound like this is going to stop anytime soon. So I just that's a personal reaction to hearing this news. But again, I'd like, obviously want to understand the town's got a financial position, but I want to make sure that just because we have a pile of money sitting over here, that we're not being unfairly looked at to balance the town's budget or contribute to balancing the town's budget.
Okay, your first part of your question, who supports their operations entirely with user fees or revenue and that sort of thing? I mean, right off the bat, the 3 that I see all the time, because they're public works divisions, are water, sewer, and solid waste. All 3 of them get no operating funds at all from the town. And then, in addition to that, you have CMLP and the Beatty Swim and Fitness Center. And both of those don't typically receive any town operating funds. They, we all do use, with the exception of solid waste that has no physical assets, we use the full faith and credit of the town when it comes time to borrow money, even though, the borrowing will be paid back from, revenue or user fees. When somebody buys a bond, they're buying a bond from the town of Concord. They're not buying a bond from the town of Concord's water department or sewer department. The issue you raise about it's not sustainable to rely on the cemetery department to contribute 100% of its operating costs without looking at the fact that if that's the model the town is looking to impose longer term, we, like any other revenue fund that is now being asked to cover the full cost, are going to have to look to raise our fees, if that's the model that is going to be carried forward longer term. But I think it's, at this point, I feel like, as I said earlier, we've done the discovery. Now we understand where we're at. I'm telling you based on what I know today, when, I finally see the final version of the town budget in the detail, they may be hitting us for less than I had anticipated this year. But my understanding was they were asking us to pay the full boat this year. So that's why I, presented it with a worst case scenario.
Jerry,
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Bob, for that presentation. And I just wanted to verify that I understand that. So the cemetery has revenue from product sales. And we had a really good quarter with, or a good year last year with the mausoleum sales. So a couple more of those would be great. Services, revenue from services. Investment income. I mean, is that a way to look at this money coming out of the trust fund?
Well, out of the perpetual care fund, that's what we're getting out of the perpetual.
Okay, so, and
Interest
then,
generated on the perpetual care fund, that 4 million plus generates a sizable chunk of interest every year.
excellent. Okay. And finally, there's like a rich uncle, the town, who's like questionable reliability right now.
Yeah, well, at times it feels like, they tell you what your allowance is. And, you line up, you get your allowance, and then they say, oh, yeah, but you gotta cover the laundry, or, so you didn't eat the school lunch, I made you the lunch, so you're gonna pay for that, it sometimes feel like they giveth and they taketh away.
Are there any other comments, questions? So,
Do we as a committee have a right to say you can't do that?
well, that's, Bobby, that's not a question for you. Okay. But that's something which the committee in subsequent meetings probably should discuss. It should be an agenda item, which is, how does one go about that? Oh, and Terry's got her hand raised.
I think that would be a great agenda item. And just as background, the idea is that the taxpayers pay for what's called the general fund, which is schools and public safety, library, recreation center. But if you have specific users, like with your electric bill, that's not paid out of the taxpayers, that's paid from the ratepayers, depending on what your electric bill is. So for the cemetery, if you buy a plot, you are a customer of the cemetery. It's more an enterprise fund that's running like a business. And the point is, should all the taxpayers in town pay for that plot, or should the user pay more like a user fee? So that's the philosophical distinction between the cemetery fund, which is more a user fee, or another one is like, if you send your kids to the recreation program camp, should all the taxpayers pay for that, or should the parents pay when their kids go to that camp? Well, right now the recreation department charges those parents a fee. So some things are general fund with taxpayers and some things are for user fees. Does that make sense?
I would like to respond, Terry. There's a weakness in that argument. I'll use myself as an example. I haven't used the school system for over 30 years.
Me too.
67% of my tax dollars have gone into school expenses.
Right.
So I think that may not be correct from a procedural perspective, but boy, from a public relations and a sort of a political perspective, I think it's probably not best to emphasize that argument, right? Because people are upset with the school budget.
Yeah.
They're very upset. They're very upset with the capital that's been sucked up with the capital.
Yeah, I am upset about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was the original way. I mean, if you think back 50 years, the way it was set up, everybody who lived in town pretty much had school children. Things are really different now. So maybe we need to take a look at the whole thing.
Terry, I'm talking about the time when my kids weren't using the schools. I mean, and everybody dies in Concord, right? So that you could make the same argument that everyone's going to use the cemetery.
I see. Okay, but we have
political argument to make to
Right.
justify the school.
Well, it was just one more thing about that. We have people, I think, from out of town who can buy a cemetery plot, right? No?
No.
No.
You have to be a resident of Concord or a former resident of Concord, and a former resident pays more.
Okay. Well, then maybe we need to take another look at it. Okay.
I'd also like to make a point. I doubt, well, maybe we charge admission if you want to walk on the cemetery lands. I'm kind of serious because this is a cultural asset for our town. I don't think anybody would think it is as the same as the sewer or the water district. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we want to treat it as just a budget line. It isn't. It's our history.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd also just like to say, I mean, the cemetery is limited, you have plenty of electricity, you have water, it's kind of a continuing thing, Our supply of lots is limited. It's not an endless, constant stream. If we're sales of revenue, it's not necessarily constant without then going out and trying to acquire more land, more property and more capital expenses. So it's not exactly akin to that.
Are there any other comments? Well, then let me draw this agenda item to a close. Bob, thank you very much. And a special shout out to Jeff, because Jeff, you have been an advocate for many, many meetings this past year to get budgetary issues discussed. And I think that this has been extremely enlightening and educational for the committee. And Jeff, you get a lot of credit for insisting that we get this on the annual calendar. So thanks very much.
I appreciate that. I appreciate Bob. I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, that's all, I'm here to support you guys. So just ask away.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Can we move to item D4, a mausoleum update? Is there any news about the mausoleum? I think you've already.
My last update?
Yeah.
No. Yes, yes.
Again, it's the annual calendar.
Yeah.
I put it on there, but
Calendar,
we covered it in advance.
That's great. Item D5 is a discussion of our master plan, section 6. Now, just to remind everyone, last meeting we talked about section 4, and we skipped over section 5, which we had earlier decided in the previous meeting, we were going to delete it because section 5 was talking about the Melvin Memorial, the preservation, and that whole project has been completed. So section 6, according to my responsibility, Priscilla and Jerry are the lead reviewers in this regard. Do you have comments or suggestions for edits to this section?
Yeah, you could, I don't know if you saw my reaction, but I totally snoozed on that one. I'm sorry.
Okay, and so,
Well, unfortunately, so I didn't snooze, I just didn't
okay,
do what I have done with the other sections, which is to really dive in and get information from Tish. And because so much of this is stuff that's going on now that I feel as if I needed guidance from her or this group. So I honestly didn't do anything.
so here's a proposal. Following this meeting, could each of you send comments to Justine, and Justine, you'll send them to me. And I will incorporate all of those edits and add it to our working draft so that you have the very awkwardly color-coded draft. But as I promised, by the end of the month, I will give you a straw man revised master plan, which you then can have at, okay? In terms, but to get everyone sort of on the same page, we'll do that, okay?
So for me, I don't know that I can do this outside of this because I don't know about any of this. So I'm not sure I could do it, make any edits and send them
Okay.
anywhere, just because I would need direction from someone. That's kind of what I was saying, was that I was reading, going through it, and I don't know any of this.
Jerry, you had marked that you would comment on section 6.1 and 6.3. So if you can send edits in there, and anyone else on the committee who has a comment to add, please just get it to Justine. I'm traveling next week and I have a lot of time to put in it, a lot of time to travels. So please get them to Justine, and Justine can get it to me and we can bang this out. Okay? Appreciate that. But just do that. Okay. With that, for that section, D5, we now go to topic D6, chair and vice chair positions for next year. It's time for us to consider that. And Jeff, I do want to confirm, is it your intention to renew your membership for next year?
It is, and I need a little clarification from the clerk because I filled a half of position, I guess, for the period. So I'm going to talk with them tomorrow. I'll get, let them know that I'm intending on getting a full term. I don't know how that works. I don't know if I have to leave halfway through the next term or what, but I should be able to be in the next full term. So that's my intention.
That's great. So we had talked informally in previous meetings about Jeff, who is the vice chair this year, becoming the chair next year. So that's one thing. And then we had also talked about who would be an appropriate vice chair. Now, Brian, you've been chair and vice chair in the past, but Priscilla, you've not had your turn. And so I would like to suggest that we think about nominating and voting, I guess, in the next meeting, to have Jeff as the chair and Priscilla as the vice chair.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that automatically assume that then I would be chair?
In another year.
And what if I don't want to do that?
Then you tell this committee you don't want to do it.
All right. I mean, then, or to be vice chair?
Well, if you feel that you don't have the inclination or the time or whatever obstacle to be vice chair, probably best to let everybody know right now.
No. I would say that I with 2025 coming up, I'm kind of stretched
Okay,
for next year.
okay. Well, that leaves us with Brian and Jerry for vice chair positions for next year. Jerry, is there any objection to you performing as the vice chair, since Brian is already?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
God bless you. Okay, so that's our discussion, and so the suggestion is that next meeting we'll formally vote, and it's a little awkward because Jeff, you'll be as the acting chair going in because you'll be the vice chair, right? This is my last meeting, so I can't. My term ends at the end of April. That's why I've been insisting to get everybody to get me comments so I can actually deliver that document officially before the end of April. Jeff, I expect that you'll, in your capacity as vice chair, you'll run the meeting, we'll convene the nominations and the vote, and then we'll make that all official for the coming year. Okay,
Sounds good.
great. Okay, so that closes D6. And let's go to D7, the chair's comments. I don't have any additional comments except to note that this is my last meeting. It's been a wonderful 3 years. I want to thank all the members of the committee, current and past members of the committee. It was wonderful to work with all of you. I want to give a special thanks to Aaron and Tish. Regrets to Doug that I didn't get a chance to work with you longer. Yeah, that would be great. But I especially of all of this, the staff for this meeting, I want to give a special shout out to Justine because Justine fixes, all my typos and calls out things that are procedural errors and keeps me on the straight and narrow in terms of what I wanted to do with the agenda, all of those things, and really very, very helpful. But everybody on the staff, the town staff, has been fantastic. So you are in great hands as a committee working, with this group. And I want to thank them very much for all that. And then I'll end with a promise. I made the commitment to give you a complete 2 versions of the draft, the color-coded, impossible to follow, but which at least has edits attributed to each member. You'll have that, as well as the sort of my synthesis of what, whose edits are more worthy of inclusion than other, edits. And then, of course, you can make all the changes you want, but it's a lot easier to do it when you have something all pulled together. So that concludes my, chair comments. Item D8. Are there any committee member comments relative to issues contained in this agenda or feedback received from residents since last meeting?
Just like, thanks, Rod, for leading us through this master plan and providing all the details and taking all the extra time to put it all together. It's a lot of work. So we appreciate your leadership and also especially as the stone walls are replaced with the CPC funding. Thank you for taking the lead on that nature project as well. So you've only been 3 years, but accomplished quite a bit in the town, and I know this committee is grateful to you.
We should get the engineering money for the metal structures. It's going to be recommended by the CPC at town meeting this year too. So maybe we'll be able to make some progress with that. After listening to Bob, I think, but maybe one of the things I'll do off this committee is see if there's any possible source of a major money source for landscaping, ground covers and trees, because it's going to be a lot that we're going to need. Yeah. Anybody, any other comments? Committee? No?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in my adventures over the last several weeks, I just wanted to call attention to something. On the calendar events at White Eagle Memorial Preserve, which is a green burial ground in Washington State, coming up in mid-May, they have a grave digging work party. Our work parties are a great opportunity to support White Eagle work and to learn more about conservation burial. We will split up into small groups to grid and prepare grave places with multiple 2-hour work sessions and then some time to be quiet on the land. They don't say if they fill in the holes afterwards, if it's just kind of like a group thing, or if they're digging actual graves that are going to be used. But I thought that was an interesting way to introduce people to the concept of conservation burial or green burial or natural burial. Those are the 3 terms that seem to be used.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. Any other comments?
I just want to thank you, Rod, for your service and for the whole committee for your service.
You're most
Thank
welcome.
you very much.
Jerry, thank you for being so constant in coming meetings and helping us with guidance and support. I appreciate that very much. Jeff, you had a addition?
Yeah, just thank you, Rod, very much, and thank you, Justine. I second your emotion about the team that supports this committee. I look forward to working with them. And Aaron had been very helpful to reach out when I was questioning, process and transition and willing. The whole team is very helpful. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to following in your footsteps. And I think it was really good timing for you to put your message across the board and then not come back to the meeting. So it gives you a lot of liberty.
Yeah, this person who handles the document last usually has the last say, so sure. Yeah.
Well done.
Are there any public comments?
No, we haven't, the Friends of Sleeping Hollow haven't met since last time, or I haven't been to a meeting since the last time we met here. Although I did want to mention to Jeff, I know he had brought up the prison cemetery.
Yeah.
So I did happen to notice, because I was at another public meeting, that the CPC has recommended approving a grant from the Concord Prison Outreach Committee to set up a little memorial to that prison cemetery. I think it's gonna involve like a bench and then a plaque that will be in the Bruce Freeman trail right away. So I thought that was nice. I just happened to hear that and thought of how you had brought that up at a past meeting. So
Thank you.
nice for that to be recognized.
Thank you, Anthony. Are there any other public comments?
To put you on the spot, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. I'm Bridget Rodrigue. I am the town clerk in Bedford, but I was previously a member of the cemetery committee here in Concord, and we relocated back to Concord during COVID. So I'm looking to join the board again.
Oh, please do.
Hey.
Pretty fantastic.
Bridget is why I joined the cemetery committee in the
Time
first
to come
place.
Well, it's now it's recorded, so that's fantastic. That is fantastic. Well, that,
Yeah, that's great.
if there are no other public comments, then may I have a motion to close the meeting?
I make a motion to close the meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call. Brian,
Aye.
Jerry,
Aye.
Jess,
Aye.
Priscilla,
Aye.
Ron, aye. We're closed and we finished with the meeting. Thank you all very much.